Chapter 1. The Dust and the Stillness. The rain in the lower quarter of the capital, Chang'an, wasn't a gentle shower. It was a viscous gray weeping, born from the perpetually smog-choked sky and hammered down with the force of a disgruntled god. It plastered the narrow cobbled streets with a slick mud, reflecting the flickering lanterns like a shattered mirror. Yuna, currently attempting to shift a heavy sack of dried ginseng, merely sighed and continued her work, a small, almost apologetic figure amidst the chaos. She was a smudge of muted colors, a gray tunic perpetually stained with turmeric and indigo, patched trousers the color of damp slate, and a headscarf pulled low to shield her eyes. Her movements were deliberate, almost painfully slow, a stark contrast to the frantic energy of the district. She was, by all accounts, an utter failure at her apprenticeship. Master Zhao, the owner of Zhao's Remedies, a dispensary that smelled of dried roots, burnt herbs, and quiet desperation, would regularly scold her for dropping jars, mismeasuring powders, and generally appearing incapable of performing even the simplest task. Head muttered about wasted potential, about how a delicate hand was needed for the artistry of alchemy, not a clumsy, vacant stare. Yuna didn't argue. Arguing was a useless endeavor. She was, as far as she knew, entirely mute. It hadn't always been this way. Her memories before the age of 7 were a fragmented tapestry of opulent silks. The scent of sandalwood, the booming voices of her father, the emperor's chief physician, and the terrifying constant awareness of being observed. Then, a fever, swift and brutal, stole her voice, leaving her trapped in a world of unspoken sounds and gestures. She was known, when she was acknowledged at all, as Lin, a convenient and utterly meaningless name given to her by Master Zhao. The residents of the lower quarter, a collection of ramshackle buildings clinging to the skirts of the city like barnacles, generally ignored her. She was simply a small, quiet thing, perpetually covered in dust, shuffling through the refuse and selling the meager herbs that she managed to salvage. The day was particularly miserable. The rain had intensified, drumming against the corrugated iron roof of Zhao's Remedies, and the air was thick with the damp smell of decay. Yuna was meticulously sorting a particularly pungent batch of wolfsbane root when General Huo, a man whose very presence seemed to leach the warmth from the air, stormed into the dispensary. Huo was a monument to self-made power, bloated, scarred, and radiating a volatile mix of arrogance and menace. He commanded the garrison of the lower quarter, a force of 50 men tasked with maintaining order and extracting bribes in this forgotten corner of Chang'an. He was also, currently, Yuna's primary tormentor. "Lin," he bellowed, his voice a grating rasp. "Still wallowing in this filth? Do you think a pretty face earns a living? You're a drain on the Empire's resources, a useless mouth that contributes nothing." He snatched a jar of dried ginger root, examining it with a disdainful sniff. A proper apothecary understands the nuances of flavor and potency. You, however, merely piled dirt on things. He then, with a savage flourish, smashed the jar against the stone floor, watching with grim satisfaction as ginger shards scattered across the worn tiles. Yuna, as always, simply stared at him, her face devoid of expression. She began to sweep up the shattered pieces, her movements slow and methodical. "You know," Huo continued, leaning heavily on his broadsword, "a peasant who cannot speak is no better than the dirt they sweep. You exist solely to be a spectacle, a reminder of the Empire's waste." Just then, a figure emerged from the gloom wren, a man who appeared to be perpetually lost in thought. He was a scholar, a failed one, he claimed, but his eyes held a quiet intelligence and a kindness that seemed utterly incongruous with the harsh reality of the lower quarter. He brought with him a small dented wooden bowl filled with steamed buns, offering one to Yuna. "You seem troubled, Lin," he said, his voice soft and measured. He didn't press her to speak. He simply offered a small comfort, a shared moment of quiet amidst the chaos. Ren was a rare visitor to Zhao's remedies, and he seemed drawn to Yuna's silent persistence. He often spent his evenings under the ancient, gnarled willow tree near the bridge, a bridge the garrison commander had recently declared an eyesore and a target for demolition. He tutored the orphan children who gathered there, patiently teaching them the basics of reading and writing. Yuna occasionally watched him from the doorway of the dispensary, fascinated by his gentle patience and the way he connected with the children. As Huo continued his tirade, a ripple of unease spread through the air. The annual Winter Solstice Festival was just days away, and the garrison had announced a surprise inspection, ostensibly to ensure the orderliness of the lower quarter. General Huo clearly intended to use this opportunity to impress Inspector Lin, a notoriously ruthless official known for his unwavering loyalty to the emperor and his fondness for punishing perceived transgressions. The air suddenly seemed to thicken, to vibrate with an unseen energy. It was a feeling Yuna had learned to recognize, the stirring of the celestial weave, the ancient kung fu style inherited through her lineage, a style that allowed her to manipulate energy with unparalleled precision. A secret dormant within her, a power she dared not consciously wield. It was a power that, if unleashed, could shatter empires. Chapter 2. Threads of Silver. The air hung thick with anticipation, a palpable tension that clung to the lower quarter like the damp mist rising from the Kao River. The Winter Solstice Festival was just hours away, and the grimy cobblestone streets buzzed with nervous energy merchants, hastily securing their wares, hawkers shouting their meager offerings, and the children of Ren's tutelage practicing rudimentary calligraphy under the watchful eye of the scholar. Yuna, meticulously grinding dry jasmine flowers for a calming balm, felt the familiar thrum of the celestial weave intensifying, a subtle vibration that settled deep within her bones. This wasn't merely an instinctive response, she was consciously cultivating it, a careful dance of energy manipulation, a secret shed honed for years, masked by her clumsy, silent existence. General Huo, predictably, was the source of the disturbance. Had been pacing the narrow lane outside Zhao's remedies, a storm of barely suppressed rage brewing behind his crimson face. He was attempting to intimidate a group of delivery boys, attempting to sell candied dates, bellowing about disorderly trade and the laziness of the masses. Yuna, huddled in the back, continued her work, her movements deliberately slow, almost apologetic. She realized, with a grim satisfaction, that his efforts were achieving precisely the opposite of their intended effect. The children, huddled closer to Ren, were watching him with wide, wary eyes, while the adults, remembering past injustices, lowered their heads and moved aside. Suddenly, a flicker of movement caught Yuna's attention. Inspector Lin, a man sculpted from ice and authority, had arrived, flanked by a squad of Imperial Guard. He wasn't a large man, but his presence commanded a room. His face, pale and etched with disapproval, scanned the lower quarter with a critical gaze. Huo, sensing a chance to assert his dominance, puffed out his chest and launched into a lengthy, self-aggrandizing speech about the virtues of order and the necessity of strong leadership. He concluded, with a pointed glare at the children, "Let this be a lesson to all who defy the law." It was then that the feeling intensified, spiraling into a dizzying rush. The jasmine flowers slipped from her grasp, scattering across the worn wooden floor. The air shimmered, not just around her, but around everything. She didn't consciously initiate the weave. It was as if a dam had broken, releasing a torrent of pure, concentrated energy. The obsidian needles, which she had instinctively drawn from beneath her simple tunic, began to glow with a pulsating silver light. This time, however, there was no hesitation. The shift wasn't a flicker, it was a blaze. Yuna stepped forward, her movements fluid and terrifyingly graceful, as if she were conducting an invisible orchestra. Her hands, usually awkward and clumsy, now moved with the precision of a master craftsman, manipulating the silver threads with breathtaking speed and control. Huo, mid-sentence, froze, his mouth agape, a look of pure, unadulterated terror etched on his face. His broadsword, raised in a threatening gesture, hung suspended in the air, inches from Ren's chest. The Imperial Guard, positioned protectively around Lin, were similarly frozen, their weapons motionless, their expressions masks of bewildered horror. The effect wasn't merely paralysis. It was a meticulous, intricate weaving of energy. Yuna didn't simply stop them, she dissected their movements, locking them into a single grotesque tableau. A soldier's arm was frozen mid-swing, his eyes wide with a silent scream. Another's foot was suspended an inch from the ground as if trapped in amber. The entire scene was a masterpiece of controlled disruption, a tangible manifestation of the Celestial Weave's lethal artistry. Inspector Lin, a man renowned for his icy composure, collapsed to his knees, clutching at his chest, his face a mask of abject fear. He recognized the technique instantly, the divine acupuncture of the Feng clan, a legend whispered in the highest echelons of the imperial court, a skill thought to be lost for centuries. "Impossible!" he gasped, his voice a dry, broken whisper. It cannot be." As the initial shock subsided, a strange, expectant silence descended upon the lower quarter. The festive preparations ceased. The children, initially startled, stared at Yuna with a mixture of awe and reverence. Ren, watching from the doorway of his dispensary, simply offered a small comfort, a shared moment of quiet amidst the chaos. He didn't need to explain his understanding of Yuna's hidden power was profound. Yuna, breathing deeply, subtly reeled in the silver threads, the obsidian needles fading back into invisibility. The frozen figures remained motionless, a chilling monument to her power. But she knew this was merely a demonstration, a shocking revelation meant to serve a far more nuanced purpose. She needed to buy time, to reveal her true intentions, to finally reclaim what was rightfully hers. The scent of jasmine filled the air, mingled with the faint tang of frozen fear. The game, she realized with a quiet intensity, had just begun. Chapter 3. The Serpent's Coil. The immediate aftermath of the Winter Solstice Festival was a whirlwind of controlled panic. Imperial guards, bewildered and thoroughly demoralized, attempted to maintain order, their commands ringing hollow against the eerie stillness of the lower quarter. Inspector Lin, still shuddering with a terror that clung to him like frost, was carefully escorted back to the Imperial Palace, a shadowed figure accompanied by a contingent of the Emperor's personal guards, a gesture designed to both intimidate and contain the rumor of a resurrected Feng clan power. Yuna, meanwhile, remained amidst the frozen tableau, a silent observer of the unfolding chaos. She hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, hadn't broken the weave state. Instead, she used the time to meticulously assess the situation. The spectacle had achieved its immediate goal. It had shattered the carefully constructed image of imperial authority and exposed the blatant corruption within the garrison. Now, she needed to guide the narrative, to shape the understanding of her actions. Ren, ever perceptive, approached her, his face etched with a quiet understanding. He carried a small, intricately carved wooden box, its surface depicting stylized dragons coiling around lotus blossoms. "You didn't harm them, Yuna," he said, his voice calm amidst the surrounding confusion. "You merely paused them. You showed them the truth." Yuna nodded, her gaze fixed on the immobile General Huo, who stood frozen in a pose of arrogant aggression, the blood draining from his face. "The truth is a dangerous weapon, Master Ren," she finally replied, her voice a low murmur, carefully modulated to avoid attracting attention. "And I intend to wield it with precision." She initiated a subtle shift within the weave state, releasing a carefully calibrated pulse of energy. It wasn't a forceful exertion, but rather a delicate adjustment, a tightening of the invisible threads, a further enhancement of the paralysis. The effect was immediate and disconcerting. 5 more soldiers, tasked with securing the area, collapsed, their bodies rigid, their faces locked in expressions of horrified surprise. This second display, carefully orchestrated, prompted a ripple of fear and fascination amongst the remaining Imperial guards. They began to whisper amongst themselves, the language of warriors and soldiers replaced with the anxious murmurs of the fearful. Some even dared to approach cautiously, their hands instinctively reaching for the hilts of their swords, only to abruptly halt as they felt the subtle pressure of the weave. As the guards realized they were not dealing with a single uncontrollable anomaly, but with a calculated and terrifying display of power, a figure emerged from the shadows. It was Counselor Zhao, a member of the Imperial Council known for his ruthlessness and unwavering loyalty to the Emperor. He wasn't armed, but his face was a mask of grim determination. "You are the heir to the Feng clan," he declared, his voice amplified by a hidden speaking scroll. This assault is a blatant act of rebellion. The Emperor demands your immediate surrender." Yuna remained motionless. Her eyes, however, were narrowing, calculating. She didn't respond to the demand. Instead, she took a deliberate step forward, moving with a speed that belied her previous stillness. She reached out, not with a weapon, but with a single obsidian needle, and touched Counselor Zhao's sleeve. It wasn't a strike, but a momentary connection. A wave of pure, targeted energy flowed through him, not to paralyze, but to induce a state of profound disorientation. He stumbled back, clutching his head, momentarily lost in a swirling vortex of sensory input. The effect was fleeting, lasting only a few heartbeats, but it was enough. As the disorientation cleared, Counselor Zhao looked around in bewildered confusion, his face pale. He saw Yuna standing before him, a silent, enigmatic figure amidst the frozen soldiers, and a sudden chilling realization dawned upon him. He understood with terrifying clarity that he was not facing an enemy, but a force far greater than any he had ever encountered. You are the key," he stammered, backing away slowly. "The key to the Empire's undoing." Suddenly, a wave of movement spread through the ranks of Imperial guards. General Li, a seasoned veteran known for his strategic brilliance, had moved. He was a master swordsman, known for his aggressive tactics and unorthodox fighting style. He advanced towards Yuna, his broadsword raised high, intending to end her before she could inflict further damage. But Yuna didn't react with force. Instead, she focused her mind, deepening her connection to the weave. A delicate, serpentine coil of energy began to form around General Li, not to attack him directly, but to subtly influence his movements, to introduce an element of chaos into his already aggressive attack. It was a calculated maneuver, a demonstration of the weave's true potential, not simply paralysis, but control, a whisper in the movements of the strongest warrior. The scene resolved into a ballet of frozen gestures and subtly influenced actions, a silent battle waged within the invisible realm of energy. Yuna had secured her foothold. The game, indeed, had only just begun, and she was already weaving her intricate strategy, using the frozen figures and bewildered officials as pieces in a grand, devastating scheme. Chapter 4. The serpents danced. The dust of the winter solstice festival still clung to the air, now mingled with the metallic scent of frozen muscle and the sharp tang of pine resin, a strange perfume born of controlled chaos. General Li, suspended mid-lunge, resembled a bronze statue, his eyes wide with a burgeoning, unsettling comprehension. The crimson of his broadsword reflected in the frozen stillness of his gaze, a miniature, terrifying sun. Yuna, leaning against a crumbling brick wall, continued to deepen her connection to the weave. It wasn't a forceful exertion, but a gentle coaxing, like a skilled weaver guiding a hesitant thread. The serpentine coil around Li hadn't ceased. It had subtly shifted, tightening around his wrist, then his elbow, then his shoulder. He hadn't screamed, hadn't even registered the discomfort beyond a vague, instinctive resistance. Instead, he began to rotate his torso, a slow, agonizing turn that threatened to throw off his entire balance. Around her, the Imperial Inspector, Lord Zhao, remained kneeling, his face a mask of stunned disbelief. 50 guards, a frozen tableau of arrogant aggression, were similarly affected, one attempting a desperate parry, another reaching for the hilt of his dagger, a third even shifting his weight, preparing to unleash a whirlwind of chaotic attacks. Yuna hadn't intended to simply disable them. She was exposing their inherent arrogance, turning their ingrained strategies against themselves. Ren, standing beside her, watched with an intensity that bordered on reverence. Had witnessed countless battles in his youth, studied the intricacies of warfare, but nothing could have prepared him for this. He reached out, his hand hovering instinctively near her sleeve, as if to steady her, before pulling back, realizing the precarious nature of her control. "It's exquisite," he finally breathed, his voice hushed with awe. "You aren't fighting with the weave, you're dancing within it." Yuna offered a small, almost imperceptible nod, her eyes fixed on Lys' struggling movements. The subtle shift in his balance was creating a domino effect. 2 guards closest to him began to stumble, tripping over themselves in a clumsy, disjointed sequence. Another, attempting to regain his footing, flailed wildly, striking a nearby wall with a resounding thud. "The weave doesn't merely paralyze," she said, her voice still a low murmur. "It exposes. It reveals the flaws in even the most carefully constructed plans." Suddenly, a high-pitched shriek cut through the tension. It was Lady May, a senior Imperial official known for her sharp wit and even sharper tongue, who had been amongst the first to witness the spectacle. She was currently experiencing the weave's influence firsthand, her limbs jerking erratically, her attempts at maintaining composure dissolving into a fit of involuntary giggles. She was rapidly becoming a caricature of her former self, a frantic, flailing puppet of Yuna's will. Yuna seized the opportunity. She shifted her focus, drawing upon the weave's potential for disruption, not control. A series of shimmering, silver needles, not 10 as before, but dozens, erupted from her sleeve, swirling around the panicked guards like a miniature, deadly blizzard. They didn't directly attack, they merely disrupted, creating momentary flashes of blinding light and disorienting sensations. One guard screamed as he felt a searing cold spreading through his limbs. Another collapsed to the ground, clutching at his chest, convinced he was suffering a fatal heart attack. The chaos, expertly guided by Yuna's steady hand, was rapidly spiraling out of control. General Li, finally understanding the scale of the danger, attempted a desperate, instinctive retreat. But the weave, sensing his intent, anticipated his movement. A single needle, impossibly fast, snaked out and wrapped around his ankle, anchoring him to the spot. He thrashed, struggling against the invisible force, but it was futile. "You seek to destroy me?" Yuna asked, her voice devoid of emotion, yet laced with a chilling intelligence. "You misunderstand. I offer you a choice: surrender, and contribute to the Empire's prosperity, or resist, and become a footnote in its ruin." Lord Zhao, regaining some semblance of control, rose to his feet, his face pale and glistening with sweat. This is madness. You are a danger to the Empire. You must be stopped." Yuna simply smiled, a flicker of something akin to pity in her eyes. "The Empire," she said, her voice gaining a subtle, resonant power, "is built on foundations of injustice and corruption. I intend to dismantle it, brick by brick." As the last of the guards succumbed to the weave's influence, a low rumble echoed through the district. Soldiers, dispatched from the Imperial Palace, poured into the square, their armor gleaming in the twilight. Leading them was a young captain, a known follower of General Li, his face contorted with fury. He drew his sword, a magnificent blade forged from star steel, and charged towards Yuna, a whirlwind of aggression. Yuna didn't flinch. She simply closed her eyes, deepening her connection to the weave, and prepared to dance. The serpent's dance had begun. Chapter 5. The serpent's dance. The square erupted in a chaos of steel and frantic shouts. Captain Zhao, fueled by righteous anger and the intimidating weight of his star-steel blade, was a relentless force. He slashed, each blow aimed not at Yuna herself, but at the air around her, attempting to disrupt the chilling stillness of the weave. The effect was immediately obvious. His movements became jerky, disjointed, like a puppet with tangled strings. Soldiers attempting to assist him fared no better, their movements slowing, their limbs feeling heavy, as if wading through thick honey. Yuna remained motionless, a serene island in the storm. She wasn't fighting in the traditional sense. Instead, she was conducting an intricate, silent symphony of energy. The obsidian needles, still shimmering with residual celestial light, weren't aimed at Zhao's body, they wove around him. A complex lattice designed to disrupt his nervous system, not to cause physical harm. It was a subtle but devastating technique, a masterpiece of control, honed over centuries, that left the body paralyzed without inflicting a single wound. The Imperial Palace Guard, accustomed to brute force and direct engagement, were utterly baffled. Their officers shouted orders, issuing contradictory commands as their men were rendered helpless. Some attempted to seize Yuna, but their hands passed through her as if she were a phantom. The sheer force of the weave was overwhelming, a tangible manifestation of control that defied their understanding of combat. Ren, meanwhile, had moved with a surprising grace, had observed the initial paralysis, recognized the pattern, and instinctively began to anticipate Yuna's movements. He didn't possess martial skills, but his mind, sharpened by years of scholarly study, was a surprisingly effective weapon. He used his body as a shield, moving with a calculated fluidity, subtly disrupting Zhao's momentum with precisely timed pushes and pulls. "She's not wielding a weapon," Zhao yelled, his voice strained. "She's controlling us." Yuna, hearing him, acknowledged the observation with a single deliberate gesture. With a flick of her wrist, a single needle shot out, wrapping around Zhao's sword hilt, instantly freezing it in place. The captain roared with fury, attempting to rip the needle free, but his movements were sluggish, hampered by the weave. The battle shifted. The Imperial Guard, initially confident in their superior numbers and weaponry, began to crumble. They were skilled soldiers, trained in the art of war, but they were fighting something they couldn't comprehend, a force that seemed to operate outside the laws of physics. Just as the situation seemed utterly hopeless, a new figure emerged from the chaos. Lord Li, Captain Zhao's master, a man renowned for his ruthlessness and mastery of the steel fist style, arrived at the head of a contingent of elite guards. Li was a mountain of a man, clad in blackened iron armor, and he attacked with a savage, unrelenting fury. He lunged at Yuna, unleashing a furious barrage of strikes, each blow aimed to shatter her defenses. But Yuna, anticipating his attack, didn't defend. Instead, she moved, a fluid dance of evasion and redirection. The weave responded, not with force, but with precision. Needles flowed around Li's limbs, not impeding his movement, but subtly altering his balance, causing him to stumble, to momentarily misjudge his attacks. She's manipulating his instincts. Someone shouted from the ranks of the guards. It was then that the serpent's dance truly began. Yuna wasn't simply defending herself, she was orchestrating a complex, deadly ballet. She used the weave to isolate Li's movements, to unravel the rhythm of his attacks. It wasn't about inflicting pain, it was about achieving control. Suddenly, a sharp, stinging sensation erupted on Yuna's arm. Li had managed to land a glancing blow with the butt of his sword, slicing through her sleeve and drawing a thin line of blood. For the first time, Yuna visibly reacted. A flicker of annoyance crossed her face. Ren, seeing her distress, moved swiftly. He didn't attempt to intervene directly. Instead, he knelt beside her, gently applying pressure to the wound, channeling a small amount of celestial energy through his hands. The wound began to close almost instantly, the bleeding stopping with a faint shimmer. "You risk yourself for me?" Yuna asked, her voice laced with a hint of surprise. "Someone must," Ren replied, his voice calm and steady. "You are a force that threatens to unravel everything. I will not allow it to be extinguished so easily." As Ren tended to her wound, the tide of the battle began to turn. The Imperial Guards, witnessing Lys' disorientation and Yuna's seemingly effortless control, began to lose their nerve. The paralyzing effect of the weave spread, and soon the entire square was a tableau of frozen figures, soldiers, guards, and even Captain Zhao, frozen mid-swing with his star steel blade, a testament to the terrifying power of the divine acupuncture. The air hung thick with tension, broken only by the soft, rhythmic movements of Yuna and Ren as they tended to her wounds, and by the silent, unsettling energy of the weave. The serpent's dance was far from over. Chapter 6. The Echo of Control. The lingering scent of ozone hung in the air, a subtle reminder of the raw power that had briefly erupted. The frozen tableau in the courtyard of the Imperial Palace remained, a disturbing, silent testament to Yuna's sudden revelation. Captain Zhao, his face pale and slick with sweat, lay prone, still clutching his star steel, the polished metal reflecting the cold, calculating gaze of the Imperial Inspector. The Inspector, a man known for his brutal efficiency and ruthless ambition, was currently attempting and failing to maintain a semblance of composure. Yuna's arm throbbed with a dull ache, a persistent reminder of Lys' audacity. The blood had stopped, thanks to Ren's swift, intuitive aid, but a deeper fatigue settled over her, a draining of the celestial weave. She watched Ren work, his movements precise, deliberate, radiating a quiet, contained power. The way he treated her not with awe, not with fear, but with a deeply considered respect, was unsettling. It was a recognition of the danger she represented, coupled with a profound understanding of her purpose. "You are remarkably calm, considering," Yuna said, her voice still a little rusty from disuse. "A single glance at that frozen soldier should have sent you into a frenzy." Ren carefully secured a linen strip around her arm, a practiced motion honed from years of tending to injured children. "Panic is a luxury we cannot afford, Lady Feng. Your power is not merely a weapon, it is a current, a force. Uncontrolled, it can shatter not just bodies, but entire realities." He paused, his eyes, the color of polished jade, fixed on her. "The weave demands focus, a delicate dance. You were disrupting it with your fear." The words struck a chord. He was right. The initial surge of power had been fueled by adrenaline, by a primal urge to protect Ren. But as the paralysis spread, Shed felt the chaotic, untamed energy of the celestial weave threatening to overwhelm her, a dizzying kaleidoscope of potential futures and disastrous outcomes. Suddenly, a high-pitched voice cut through the tension. "This is an outrage, an affront to the Imperial dynasty." It was Counselor Lu, a man whose reputation for sycophancy and self-serving ambition was only rivaled by his physical stature. He was flanked by two hulking guards, their faces a mask of barely contained fury. Lu, along with several other members of the Imperial Council, had been instrumental in orchestrating the investigation into the rumors surrounding Yuna Kaio. "This mute servant has unleashed a demon upon the court," Lu bellowed, gesturing wildly at the frozen scene. "She must be apprehended. Her power is a threat to the stability of the Empire." Yuna remained motionless, her gaze unwavering. She felt the subtle vibrations of the weave around her, like a spider web, sensing the slightest disturbance. The guards moved forward, weapons drawn, but as they neared, the paralysis intensified. A guard's sword arm froze mid-swing, a hand clutching his hilt suspended in a grotesque imitation of combat. "You underestimate the weave," Yuna said, her voice clear and resonant. devoid of any trace of the clumsiness she presented to the world. It is not a weapon of brute force. It is a tool of balance. Ren stepped forward, placing a hand on Lu's arm. Counselor, your anger is understandable, but your actions are driven by fear, a fear of the unknown. Lady Feng does not seek to destroy the empire, she seeks to correct it. Lu, momentarily stunned by the sudden shift in Yuna's demeanor, hesitated. He recognized the subtle energy radiating from Ren, the faint shimmer of the weave, a force he couldn't comprehend, but instinctively understood was profoundly dangerous. He tried to dismiss it, to maintain his composure, but the paralysis was relentless, spreading like a creeping frost. As Lu's legs locked, a low, guttural groan escaped his lips. The Imperial Inspector, witnessing the complete and utter domination of the court by this seemingly insignificant mute servant, let out a strangled gasp. Da shall do wow. Da! The Feng clan, he whispered, his voice filled with a mixture of terror and bewildered admiration. The legend, it's true. The serpent's dance continued, but the stakes had shifted. Yuna and Ren were no longer simply defending themselves, they were dismantling a corrupt system built on intimidation and deceit. The frozen figures in the courtyard were not just a spectacle of power, but a visual representation of the empire's crumbling foundations, each frozen moment a testament to the devastating potential of a secret unveiled. As the echoes of control reverberated through the imperial palace, Yuna knew this was only the beginning. Chapter 7. The echoes of correction, the aftermath of the winter solstice festival, was a carefully orchestrated whirlwind of official mourning and frantic investigation. The Imperial Inspector, Lord Lu, a man known for his meticulous records and ruthless efficiency, was confined to the Imperial Palace, his face a mask of bewildered fury. He spent his days issuing increasingly nonsensical decrees, demanding a complete overhaul of the Imperial Guard's training regimen, insisting on a re-evaluation of all foreign relations, and commissioning countless sketches of Yuna's obsidian needles. The very air around him seemed to vibrate with suppressed panic. Meanwhile, the news of Yuna's revealed power had spread like wildfire through the capital, Chang'an. Whispers turned to shouts, anxieties fermented into open revolt. The merchant guilds, once the bedrock of Huo's illicit empire, crumbled under the weight of his disgrace. The city guard, now acutely aware of the devastating potential of the celestial weave, were utterly demoralized, their bravado replaced by a chilling reverence. Ren, basking in the unexpected glory, skillfully navigated the treacherous currents of the imperial court. He presented himself as a sage, a calm voice amidst the chaos, subtly guiding the Imperial Inspector towards a cautious acceptance of Yuna's role. He argued that the Feng clan, driven underground centuries ago for their unorthodox methods, had been unjustly demonized. The weave, he explained, his voice resonating with a quiet authority, is not a weapon of destruction, but a tool of balance. It seeks to mend what is broken, to restore equilibrium to the flow of vitality. Yuna, observing this carefully constructed facade, remained a study in controlled stillness. She continued her work in the district, sorting herbs and tending to the wounded, but her movements now carried an undeniable weight, a silent promise of retribution. The children at the orphanage, initially terrified by her sudden display of power, were now utterly devoted to her, seeing her not as a frightening warrior, but as a benevolent protector, a living embodiment of quiet strength. The turning point came during a formal audience with the emperor, a frail, elderly man named Zhao Wei, known for his capricious moods and deep distrust of anyone wielding true power. The emperor, surrounded by a throng of advisors and eunuchs, demanded an explanation for Yuna's abilities. Lu, still clinging to the remnants of his authority, attempted to downplay the situation, suggesting she was merely a skilled healer with a peculiar technique. Yuna remained silent, her expression unreadable. Then, with a single deliberate movement, she produced a handful of withered jasmine blossoms. Focusing her energy, she entered the weave state once more. The air shimmered, and the blossoms pulsed with a silver light, rejuvenating with an almost miraculous speed. The scent of jasmine, intoxicating and potent, filled the room, momentarily silencing the advisors and even causing the emperor to gasp in amazement. "The weave," Ren stated, stepping forward, "allows one to manipulate the very essence of life, to repair what is broken, and to restore what has been lost. It is a gift, not a curse." The emperor, visibly shaken, decreed that Yuna would be given a palace within the imperial palace itself, an unprecedented honor. He recognized, perhaps for the first time, the true potential of the celestial weave. However, not everyone welcomed this shift in the balance of power. Counselor Zhao, a staunch traditionalist and Huo's closest ally, viewed Yuna with open hostility. He rallied support amongst the older guard, spreading rumors of demonic pacts and forbidden arts. He argued that Yuna was a dangerous anomaly, a threat to the established order, and demanded her immediate removal. "This balance you speak of," Zhao hissed during a clandestine meeting with the Imperial Inspector, "is merely a tool for a hidden agenda. The Feng clan always sought to undermine the Empire from within, to sow discord and chaos." As Zhao spoke, the air around Yuna, almost imperceptibly, began to thicken. She hadn't moved, hadn't spoken, but the silver shimmer of the weave was evident in the subtle distortion of the light, a silent warning of the force gathering within her. Ren, sensing the growing threat, placed a hand on her arm. "Counselor," he said, his voice calm but firm, "you misunderstand. Yuna's actions are not driven by malice, but by a desire to heal. Her strength is a reflection of the damage inflicted upon this empire, upon its people." Yuna slowly raised her hand, and in her palm, a single, perfectly formed jasmine blossom pulsed with a brilliant silver light. It wasn't a weapon, not yet, but a symbol, a testament to the power she held, and a chilling reminder of the reckoning that was swiftly approaching. The echoes of correction were beginning to resonate throughout Chang'an, and no one could deny that the ancient heir of the Feng clan was poised to rewrite the future of the empire. Chapter 8. The Silver Bloom. The following days in Chang'an were a tempest of whispered accusations and carefully veiled threats. Zhao's words, amplified by the nervous energy of the Imperial Guard and the fervent pronouncements of the local monasteries, had taken root. The anomaly of Yuna Feng, the silent herbalist, was now being framed as a harbinger of disruption, a rogue element threatening the stability of the empire. Ren, ever observant, saw the shift in the city's atmosphere. The casual disdain in the eyes of the guards, the pointed glances directed at Yuna as she diligently sorted herbs in the dilapidated apothecary, had hardened into something colder, more suspicious. He sought counsel with Master Jian, the wizened, retired instructor of the Feng clan's martial arts, who had arrived in Chang'an under the guise of a traveling scholar. Jian, a man whose face was a roadmap of ancient battles and hidden wisdom, confirmed Ren's fears. "The celestial weave is a dormant volcano, child," Jian rasped, his voice like rustling parchment. "It has slumbered for generations, but the touch of such raw potentiality attracts attention. The Emperor's paranoia is a dangerous current. It can sweep away even the strongest vessels." He paused, his gray eyes fixed on Yuna as she meticulously measured out a potent sedative. The Feng clan's power is not meant to be wielded lightly. It is a tool for correction, not chaos. But in the wrong hands that evening, as the first snow of the winter settled over Chang'an, Yuna found herself cornered in the apothecary's back room. Zhao, accompanied by a contingent of 20 elite guards, stood blocking the doorway. He wore a smug expression, a thin smile twisting his lips. "Such a shame," he said, his voice dripping with condescension. "To think this humble servant could so easily disrupt the imperial order." You believe you can simply erase our efforts with displays of demonry? He gestured dismissively at the jars of herbs, the worn tools, the silent testament to Yuna's hidden power. Before Yuna could react, the air shimmered. It wasn't a dramatic display like the winter solstice festival. No visible needles materialized. This was something subtler, a deepening of the silver haze that clung to her, a tightening of the weave around her being. It radiated outwards, not as a paralyzing force, but as a wave of raw, contained energy. The guards froze mid-step, their faces etched with confusion and a primal sense of dread. Not paralyzed, not completely incapacitated, but their movements slowed, their reactions dulled. It was as if their will, their intention, was being subtly countered. Yuna, maintaining her silent stance, focused her mind. She wasn't directing a violent attack. Instead, she was amplifying the very anxieties within Zhao's being, feeding on his suspicion, his fear of disruption, his ingrained need for control. It was a precise manipulation, a surgical incision into the fabric of his confidence. Zhao's face flushed crimson. He sputtered, attempting to regain his composure, but the pressure was unrelenting. He clutched his chest, breathing heavily. "Stop this!" he managed to choke out, his voice laced with panic. "You are a danger, a threat." As he spoke, Yuna raised her hand again, this time holding a single, perfectly formed jasmine blossom. The silver light pulsed with an intensity that drew all eyes. The blossom wasn't simply glowing, it felt alive, saturated with the energy of the weave. It wasn't an offensive weapon, but a concentrated projection of her power, a visual embodiment of the impending correction. Ren, who had followed them to the apothecary, stepped forward, placing himself between Yuna and Zhao. "Counselor," he said, his voice resonating with a quiet authority, "you misunderstand. This is not an act of aggression. It is a reflection of your own state of mind, a reflection of the discord you seek to create." The jasmine blossom pulsed again, and this time, a faint scent of jasmine filled the air, subtly altering the atmosphere. It wasn't a pleasant fragrance, it carried an undercurrent of bitter resolve, of undeniable strength. Zhao, visibly shaken, took a step back. The guards, sensing the shift in power, hesitated. The silver haze around Yuna intensified, coalescing into a shimmering barrier that seemed to repel them. Suddenly, a volley of arrows whistled through the air, striking the apothecary's windows and scattering shards of glass. It was a coordinated attack, orchestrated by loyalist elements within the Imperial Guard, fueled by Zhao's directives. Without a word, Yuna moved. It wasn't a swift martial movement, but a breathtaking display of controlled force. The arrows, suspended in mid-air, began to unravel, their trajectory disrupted by invisible threads of energy. Each arrow dissolved into a shimmering mist, a testament to the utter dominance of the celestial weave. The attackers, realizing the futility of their assault, retreated. As they vanished into the snow-dusted streets, Yuna held the jasmine blossom aloft, a single, luminous beacon in the gathering darkness, a silent promise of reckoning. Chapter 9. The Weaver's Requiem. The retreat of the Loyalist Guards left a chilling silence in its wake, punctuated only by the crackling of the winter fire and the rhythmic drip of melting snow from the shattered apothecary windows. Zhao, a tremor in his finely tailored robes, stared at Yuna with an expression bordering on terror. Had expected a display of brute force, a brutal confrontation. Instead, Head witnessed something other, something that seemed to defy the very structure of his carefully constructed world. "You possess abilities beyond comprehension," he stammered, his voice losing its usual crispness. The Feng clan's legend, it was not mere rumor. Yuna didn't respond directly. She continued to hold the jasmine blossom, its luminescence growing subtly brighter, feeding an almost palpable hum of energy that seemed to vibrate through the very stone of the apothecary. The silver haze surrounding her thickened, not as a defensive shield, but as an active, pulsing weave, intricate and unsettling like a tapestry of frozen starlight. "The weave is not a weapon, counselor," she said, her voice a low murmur, startlingly clear despite her supposed muteness. "It is a reflection of imbalance, of corruption. And you, Counselor Zhao, are the most profound imbalance in this empire." Suddenly, a low groan echoed from the shadows. Ren, leaning heavily against the counter, his ribs still bruised and tender, managed a weak smile. "Just learn to speak, Yuna," he whispered, his eyes wide with a mixture of disbelief and profound affection. "She sees the truth." The jasmine blossom pulsed again, this time releasing a wave of intensely sweet fragrance that momentarily masked the metallic tang of ozone, the residue of the unraveling arrows. As the scent faded, a fine layer of frost began to coat the shelves, each crystal forming a miniature reflection of Yuna, a silent, ethereal sentinel. Before Zhao could issue a command, before any of the remaining Imperial Guard could react, the ground beneath them began to shift. Not violently, not with an earthquake, but with a slow, deliberate distortion of reality. It started subtly, the flickering oil lamp casting an unnervingly elongated shadow, the geometric patterns of the floor tiles seeming to writhe and twist. Then, with a sickening lurch, the entire apothecary was enveloped in a shimmering, silver mist. It wasn't a physical attack. Instead, Yuna was manipulating the very fabric of space and time within the confines of the room, drawing on the potency of the celestial weave. Objects blurred, momentarily existing in multiple states, a jar of ginger root splitting into 1,000 shimmering fragments, a stack of dried herbs collapsing into a swirling vortex, then reforming whole. Zhao screamed, a high-pitched, panicked sound that seemed to echo endlessly within the distorted space. The Imperial Guard, frozen in a tableau of confusion and fear, were caught in a similar state of temporal flux. Some existed a moment out of sync with reality, their movements jerky and disjointed. Others seemed to flicker in and out of existence entirely. Yuna, her face serene and focused, continued to weave. The silver threads of the weave tightened around Zhao, not to bind him, but to expose him. The temporal distortions intensified, forcing him to relive moments of his life, his corrupt dealings, his dismissive treatment of the common folk. The lie's head spun to climb the imperial ladder. Each painful memory was projected onto the shimmering silver walls of the apothecary, a haunting replay of his transgressions. "You build your empire on deceit and suffering," she said, her voice resonating with a quiet, devastating power. "You think to control the weave, but the weave controls you, counselor. It reveals the truth." As the final memory of Zhao's ambition and cruelty faded, the temporal distortions abruptly ceased. The silver haze dissipated, leaving the apothecary restored, though bearing the undeniable marks of the weaver's intervention: shattered glass, frozen herbs, and the thoroughly humiliated Imperial counselor. But the revelation wasn't complete. As the last vestiges of the silver light faded, a new scent filled the air, not jasmine, but something ancient and profoundly sad, like the scent of forgotten empires and lost souls. From the depths of the apothecary, amidst the debris, a single, ancient scroll unfurled itself, its pages filled with elegant calligraphy, depicting the origins of the celestial weave. "The weave," Yuna murmured, tracing the symbols with a delicate finger, "is not merely a skill. It is a responsibility, a burden for those who understand its power." She looked up, her eyes meeting Ren's. "And you, Ren, are worthy of that burden. You have shown me the true meaning of compassion. You have shown me what it means to truly see." The jasmine blossom, now dimmed, fell silently to the floor, its fragrance lingering as a poignant reminder of the weaver's requiem, a testament to the destructive power of corruption, and the profound beauty of a simple act of kindness. The battle for the empire, Yuna realized, had only just begun. Chapter 10. Echoes of the Weaver's Requiem, the dust of the Winter Solstice Festival, still clung to the cobblestones of the restored district, a gritty reminder of the spectacle Yuna had orchestrated. The Imperial Academy, a magnificent structure of white marble and dark wood, already buzzed with activity scholars, poring over texts, children learning to write with elegant brushes, the air thick with the promise of knowledge. Ren, radiating a quiet dignity he had never known before, oversaw the proceedings with a calm that belied the chaos he had once known. Had even insisted on retaining the bridge's original stone, a small act of defiance that spoke volumes about his transformation. Yuna, however, remained largely unseen, a shadow flitting through the Academy's corridors. She continued her daily tasks meticulously, organizing herbs in the newly established infirmary, meticulously cleaning the workshop, subtly monitoring the students' progress. The constant need to conceal her true abilities, to maintain the fade of the clumsy mute apprentice, was a weariness that settled deep within her. But the initial shock of her revelation, the seismic shift in the Empire's perception of her, was beginning to settle into a measured, almost strategic calm. General Huo, a gaunt, defeated figure, shuffled silently amongst the porters, his face a mask of sullen shame. The weight of his former power was gone, replaced by the monotonous rhythm of hauling supplies, a task he performed with a chilling lack of awareness, a permanent stillness reflecting the paralysis head once inflicted. The sight of him, stripped of rank and wealth, fueled a quiet satisfaction within Yuna. But it wasn't vengeance she felt. It was a recognition of a broken man, a stark reminder of the corrupting influence of ambition. The events of the Winter Solstice Festival still echoed in the minds of the Imperial Court. The Miracle Weaver, as she was now being called, was a source of both awe and suspicion. The Emperor, a cautious and pragmatic ruler, summoned Yuna to the Forbidden City, not with open admiration, but with a carefully orchestrated combination of curiosity and apprehension. He demanded an explanation, a demonstration of her divine skill. Yuna, accompanied by Ren and a handful of hand-picked scholars individuals, subtly vetted for their integrity, presented herself before the Emperor. She didn't perform a grand, public display of her celestial weave. Instead, she presented a simple case of withered apricot blossom, its petals drooping, its scent long gone. With a focused breath, she entered the weave state, the familiar silver haze enveloping her. The blossom, within seconds, burst forth with vibrant life, its petals unfurling, its scent intoxicatingly sweet. The Emperor, along with his advisors, watched in stunned silence. The techniques of the Feng clan were legendary, whispered about in hushed tones tales of healers who could mend bones and heal the sick with a single touch. But no one had ever witnessed the weave in action, let alone seen it wielded with such devastating precision. "It is remarkable," the Emperor finally conceded, his voice laced with a cautious respect. "But it is also unsettling. Such power it cannot be entrusted lightly." Yuna responded with a quiet observation. "Power, Your Majesty, is simply a reflection of the will of the wielder. The weave does not bestow power, it amplifies intention. It is the intention that shapes the miracle, and the consequences of that miracle." Her words, delivered with a sincerity that disarmed even the most skeptical officials, prompted a debate that lasted for days. The Emperor, recognizing the potential of Yuna's abilities, didn't attempt to control her. Instead, he established a council, a diverse group of scholars, physicians, and martial artists to advise her, to guide her use of the celestial weave, and to safeguard the Empire from any potential misuse. But the council was also a constant reminder of the precariousness of her situation. The Empire, it seemed, was still struggling to comprehend a reality that defied its established order. As Yuna prepared to return to the academy, Ren found her amongst the herb drying racks, a single jasmine blossom clutched in her hand. "You've changed things, Yuna," he said, his voice filled with a warmth that deepened the quiet resonance within her. "You've shown the Empire the possibility of a different path." Yuna looked at him, a ghost of a smile playing on her lips. "The path is not fixed, Ren," she said, her voice soft, almost lost in the rustling of the herbs. "It is shaped by those who choose to walk it. And sometimes, the most profound changes begin with a single, quiet act of kindness." Suddenly, a flicker of that familiar silver haze returned, fleeting and almost imperceptible. Yuna froze, her hand instinctively reaching for the obsidian needles hidden within her sleeve. The scent of forgotten empires, of lost souls, returned, stronger this time, interwoven with the jasmine. It wasn't a threat, it felt like an echo. "The weave it remembers," she whispered, her eyes reflecting the nascent power within her. A reminder of the burden and the extraordinary responsibility she now carried. Chapter 11. The Echoes of Silver the Yasmines. Fragrance clung to Yuna, a fragile shield against the unsettling resonance that pulsed through her. The flicker had been brief, a phantom touch of the celestial weave, yet it had carried with it a weight far heavier than the obsidian needles hidden beneath her worn tunic. Ren, sensing her shift, approached cautiously, his brow furrowed with concern. "Yuna, are you all right?" You were shimmering again. He reached out a tentative hand, but she gently pulled away, the jasmine blossom held tighter against her chest. "It's a reminder," she said, her voice carefully neutral, masking the surge of disorientation. "The weave doesn't just hold power, it holds echoes. Every active use, every moment of connection to it, leaves a trace. And lately, those traces are growing stronger, more insistent." She didn't elaborate, afraid to voice the unsettling realization that she wasn't merely controlling the celestial weave, it was beginning to control her. It was a concept the Council had warned of, a dangerous feedback loop where the flow of energy could overwhelm a novice, twisting their intent and unleashing uncontrollable force. "The inspector, he recognized the technique, didn't he?" Ren asked, his voice laced with a cautious excitement. "He understood the power of the Feng clan?" Yu nodded, a grim acknowledgement. He understood the potential for disruption. He saw that the empire, built on rigid hierarchies and enforced silence, couldn't possibly comprehend what I truly am. She paused, her gaze fixed on the drying herbs, meticulously arranging them into neat rows. "The more I utilize the weave, the more it demands acknowledgement, the more it wants to be heard." Suddenly, the air grew colder, a damp chill that settled on the back of her neck. The scent of jasmine intensified, mingling with a metallic tang, the unmistakable scent of solidified energy. Without conscious thought, her fingers tightened around the sleeves of her tunic, drawing out the obsidian needles. They seemed to pulse with a faint silver light. This time, the flicker wasn't fleeting. It solidified, resolving into a shimmering curtain of silver energy that enveloped her entirely. She stood motionless, a statue carved from moonlight, the air around her visibly distorting. But it wasn't the paralysis of Huo's encounter. This felt different. This wasn't about restraining or manipulating. This was about listening. Ren, utterly stunned, could only stand frozen, his face a mask of disbelief. Had witnessed her masterful display at the Winter Solstice Festival, a shocking demonstration of unimaginable power. But this was something else entirely. It felt as if she were drawing in the very essence of the weave, not pushing it outwards. A voice, not spoken but felt, resonated within her mind. It was ancient, vast, and impossibly complex. A chorus of whispers from countless generations of celestial weavers. It spoke of the balance of the universe, of the interconnectedness of all things, of the devastating consequences of disrupting that balance. "The threads they are tangled," the voice echoed within her. "A wound deep within the soil. A corruption that feeds on stagnation and despair." Yuna staggered, clutching her head. The silver haze intensified, threatening to consume her. She fought against the intrusion, desperately focusing on Ren's presence, anchoring herself to his humanity, to the simple act of kindness that had sparked her journey. It's pulling me towards the north, she gasped, her voice strained. Towards the forgotten peaks. The source of the disruption, it's there. Before she could fully articulate her discovery, the shimmering silver vanished as abruptly as it had appeared. She collapsed to her knees, gasping for air, the obsidian needles sliding unnoticed from her grasp. The scent of jasmine dissipated, leaving behind only the lingering chill and a profound sense of unease. Ren rushed to her side, kneeling beside her, his face etched with worry. Yuna. No. What was that? What did you see? Yuna slowly pushed herself up, her movements deliberate, as if warding off a phantom pain. She looked at Ren, her eyes dark with exhaustion and a dawning horror. The weave isn't just a weapon, Ren, she said, her voice barely a whisper. It's a compass. And it's pointing us toward a darkness I don't yet understand. A darkness that threatens to unravel everything. She glanced back towards the Imperial Academy, a nascent monument to her actions and Ren's unwavering belief in her. We need to warn the Council, she said, a chilling resolve hardening her voice. This isn't just about protecting the Empire from a powerful warrior. It's about containing a force that could consume it from within. The echo of silver lingered in the air, a silent testament to the profound and terrifying responsibility she now carried. The path was not fixed, she thought, a sudden chilling certainty settling within her. It was shaped by those who chose to walk it, and she, the Riches' ancient heir, was about to embark on a journey far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. Chapter 12. The Serpent's Coil. The Imperial Inspector, a portly man named Zhao, still lay prone in the dust, his face a mask of bewildered reverence. 50 frozen soldiers, a glittering tableau of bronze and steel, surrounded him, each a statue of stunned disbelief. The air itself felt charged, thick with the residual energy of the weave, a palpable hum that prickled the skin. Yuna, leaning heavily against a weathered stone wall, felt the familiar draining sensation, the exhaustion clinging to her like a shroud. Ren, ever vigilant, had arranged for a cool compress of moistened willow bark and a soothing herbal tea. He spoke in low, urgent tones, his hands moving with a practiced tenderness that both calmed and unnerved her. You were magnificent, Yuna. The legends speak of the Feng clan's mastery, but to see it manifested it defies comprehension. Yuna forced a weak smile. Legends often exaggerate, she murmured, attempting to regain her composure. The weave is unpredictable. It responds to intent, to focus, to resonance. That's what I realized, Ren. It's not a weapon for striking, it's a tool for shaping. The scent of jasmine was entirely gone, replaced by the damp, earthy odor of the district, a smell she now found strangely comforting. The unsettling chill remained, a constant reminder of the immense power she'd unleashed, and the terrible knowledge she'd gained. The darkness, she repeated, her voice gaining a sharper edge. It isn't simply a threat to the Empire. It's woven into the very fabric of our history, into the legacy of the Feng clan. The celestial weave wasn't designed for defense, it was designed for control. This revelation hung heavy in the air. Yuna knew she had to speak to the Council, to alert them to the danger before it spiraled out of control. But she also knew the Council, a collection of ambitious, paranoid officials, wouldn't believe her. They'd dismiss her as a madwoman, a dangerous anomaly best contained. I've dispatched a messenger, she said, her hand instinctively reaching for the concealed pouch at her waist, where she kept a single, perfectly polished obsidian needle. Hez headed to the capital with a full account of what occurred. But I need to know more. The weave, it resonated with something else, something ancient. It wasn't purely Feng clan. It was serpentine. This statement sent a shiver through Ren. He recognized the term instantly, the serpent's coil. It was a whispered legend, a cautionary tale amongst the most senior members of the Feng clan, speaking of a rogue faction centuries ago who had delved too deeply into the forbidden arts, attempting to manipulate not just life, but the very essence of reality. They had sought to create a paradise, a world devoid of suffering, but their hubris had unleashed a chaotic force, a creature of pure energy, a serpent of shadows that nearly consumed the entire clan. The clan elders suppressed the knowledge, fearing its corrupting influence, Ren explained, his brow furrowed with concern. They believed the weave was a gift, a tool for healing, not a weapon to be wielded carelessly. But this resonance you felt, it suggests something far more profound, something awakened. Suddenly, a sharp, insistent rapping echoed from the mouth of the alleyway. A young Imperial guard, his face pale and grim, stepped forward. "Lady Yuna," he announced, his voice hushed. "An Imperial decree? General Zhao requests your immediate presence at the Imperial Palace. He claims you possess unique skills." Yuna's blood ran cold. This was a trap. The council, sensing her power, was attempting to bring her under their control. "Tell General Zhao," she said, her voice carefully controlled, "that I require a full explanation of the circumstances surrounding his actions in the lower district, and that I will attend his summons when I deem it prudent." As the guard retreated, Ren approached her, his eyes filled with a mixture of apprehension and admiration. "You are playing a dangerous game, Yuna," he said softly. "You've exposed yourself to forces you cannot comprehend. But you've also revealed a power that could reshape the Empire. Be careful. The serpent will always seek to coil around those who awaken its slumber." He paused, then added, his voice laced with quiet determination, "I will help you, Yuna. We will unravel this mystery together. We must understand the true nature of the weave, and the darkness it reveals." Yuna looked out at the burgeoning Imperial Academy, a beacon of hope and knowledge rising from the ruins of General Huo's tyranny. The shimmering silver needles, though vanished for the moment, were still within her, a coiled potential waiting to be unleashed. The path ahead was fraught with peril, a descent into the heart of an ancient conspiracy. But she would face it, armed with her knowledge, her power, and the unwavering support of a scholar who saw not a mute servant, but a hidden heir, a protector of the Empire, and perhaps the last hope against a darkness that threatened to consume them all. Chapter 13. Echoes of the Loom. The Imperial Inspector, Lord John, remained a trembling statue amidst the bustling, bewildered chaos of the newly established academy. He hadn't moved since Yuna's stunning revelation, his face a mask of horrified fascination. Even his most trusted guards, hardened men who'd seen countless battles, stood frozen in rigid postures, a silent testament to the potency of the celestial weave. The air itself seemed to vibrate with residual energy, a faint silver shimmer clinging to the stone walls of the academy. Yuna, clad in a simple dark gray tunic procured from a sympathetic silk merchant, a far cry from the drab apprentice clothes, shed worn for months, watched them with a cool, deliberate calm. The sheer audacity of her actions, the raw power shed unleashed, still felt unfamiliar. It was a muscle she hadn't consciously trained for years, a dormant instinct now roaring to life. "The council," she began, her voice, still deliberately soft and lacking inflection, carrying a surprising weight, "will undoubtedly be seeking explanations. They will, I suspect, be curious." She addressed Lord John, a single precise sentence delivered with the authority of someone accustomed to commanding. Lord John, jolted from his paralysis by her words, managed to strangled. But the Feng clan? The legends they spoke of this as a myth. A technique lost to time. Yuna offered a fleeting, almost pitying, smile. "Legends are often rooted in truth, Lord Jian. The weave is not a myth. It is a reflection of the natural flow of energy, harnessed through rigorous discipline and a particular bloodline." She glanced pointedly towards Ren, who stood beside her, observing the scene with a carefully controlled expression of concern. The council, predictably, acted with the panicked efficiency of those who'd suddenly realized their authority was crumbling. Within hours, a contingent of heavily armored officials, led by the stern and unwavering Grand Chancellor Zhao, arrived at the Imperial Academy. Zhao, a veteran warrior known for his ruthlessness and unwavering loyalty to the dynasty, was a man steeped in tradition and steeped even deeper in suspicion. He demanded an immediate explanation, his voice a low rumble of disapproval. "Explain this disruption, Lady Feng. You have disrupted the natural order, unveiled a power that should remain hidden. This displays utter disregard for the authority of the Emperor and the Council." Yuna remained impassive. "I have merely ensured that a corrupt official's actions are met with appropriate consequence," she replied, her voice flat. General Huo was a blight upon this city. His power was built on extortion and brutality. Justice, however uncomfortable, is always necessary. Ren, stepping forward, his voice carrying a quiet strength, added, "The Council often forgets that true strength lies not in blind obedience, but in upholding the principles of fairness and compassion." His words, spoken with the authority of a scholar trained in rhetoric, subtly undermined Zhao's forceful demands. Zhao's eyes narrowed. "You dare question the Council, scholar?" "I question the actions of those in power," Ren countered, his gaze unwavering. "And I believe it is our duty to hold them accountable." Yuna, seizing the opportunity, delivered her ultimatum. "I require a full explanation of the circumstances surrounding General Huo's actions in the lower district, specifically his use of palace funds to maintain his private guard. And I will attend his summons when I deem it prudent." The threat, delivered with such chilling precision, silenced Zhao momentarily. The Council, observing the shift in power, began to subtly shift their own positions. Some, particularly those who'd benefited from Huo's corruption, expressed reservations. Others, recognizing the sheer force of Yuna's presence, simply retreated, their faces a mixture of fear and respect. As the Council's delegation dispersed, defeated but not broken, Ren approached Yuna, his expression thoughtful. "You're playing a dangerous game, Yuna," he said softly. "You've exposed yourself to forces you cannot comprehend. But you've also revealed a power that could reshape the Empire. Be careful. The serpent will always seek to coil around those who awaken its slumber." He paused, then added, his voice laced with quiet determination, "I will help you, Yuna. We will unravel this mystery together. We must understand the true nature of the weave, and the darkness it reveals." The Council's attempts to seize control intensified in the following days. They sent envoys, offering titles, positions, even vast sums of gold, in exchange for Yuna's cooperation. But she remained unyielding, a silent, inscrutable presence within the burgeoning academy, a constant reminder of the power she wielded. During one of these tense negotiations, a flicker of movement caught her eye. A small, almost invisible silver thread, thinner than a spider's silk, snaked from a shadowed corner of the academy, pulsing with a faint, internal light. It wasn't the weave, not exactly. It was something older, something woven into the very fabric of the city. A silent observer, perhaps a remnant of the celestial weave's ancient origins. The serpent indeed, and it was watching her. Chapter 14. Echoes of the Loom. The Council's envoys, a parade of silk and polished jade, continued their relentless pressure. Lord Zhao, a man whose ambition was only surpassed by his vanity, arrived with a retinue of guards, and a particularly ostentatious display of gold, a miniature dragon crafted from solid platinum, which he insisted Yuna examine with scientific curiosity. He offered her the governorship of the southern provinces, a title that would make her a figure of immense power, and a personal fortune exceeding even the Feng clan's accumulated wealth. Yuna remained unmoved, a pale, still figure amidst the clamor. She continued her meticulous work at the academy, overseeing the construction of the Grand Library, correcting the clumsy calligraphy of young scholars, and meticulously arranging medicinal herbs in her small private workshop. The academy was blossoming a haven of learning built on a foundation of stunned respect and hushed awe. But beneath the surface, a subtle tension throbbed, a silent battle between Yuna's quiet resistance and the council's relentless ambition. It was Ren who first noticed the shift, had observed her growing unease, the fleeting moments of shadowed contemplation, the almost imperceptible tightening of her jaw. "You're not merely refusing them, Yuna," he said one evening, as they sat sharing a simple bowl of rice. "You're fighting something. Something beyond the council." Had been studying the strange silver thread head glimpsed during his own investigations into the Academy's foundations. It hadn't responded to the weave state, it simply existed, a shimmering anomaly within the walls. Had taken to calling it the loom's echo. "I've unearthed something disturbing in the ancient texts," he continued, his brow furrowed. "The celestial weave isn't merely a fighting style, Yuna. It's a conduit, a link to the very patterns of creation. The Feng clan didn't just develop it, they maintained it. And for centuries, they used it to subtly influence events, not through brute force, but through intricate manipulations of energy, a delicate art of mending the threads of fate." Just then, the silver thread, previously dormant, pulsed with renewed vigor. It lengthened, wrapping itself around a pillar supporting the Academy's central dome, the faint light intensifying. Yuna's eyes, usually a muted gray, flashed with an unnerving silver sheen. "It's responding to my awareness," she murmured, her voice barely a whisper. "It's as if it's aware of me." Suddenly, a wave of nausea washed over her. Images flooded her mind, swirling patterns of silver, vast landscapes shimmering with energy, and fleeting glimpses of faces she didn't recognize, faces from centuries past, belonging to the Feng clan's most skilled weave masters. She felt a terrible sense of disorientation, a feeling of being pulled apart and reassembled. The council's envoys, alerted by the commotion, rushed into the academy. Lord Zhao, predictably, saw an opportunity. "A breakdown," he boomed, stepping forward with a predatory grin. "The girl is unstable. We must ensure her well-being, and of course, the safety of the Empire." Before anyone could react, Yuna moved with a speed that defied explanation. The loom's echo pulsed, drawing a shimmering thread from the air and deftly weaving it around Zhao's wrist. He froze, his expression one of startled horror as a wave of debilitating pain shot through him, followed by a profound sense of disorientation. He collapsed to the floor, his platinum dragon tumbling beside him. This time, Yuna didn't stitch the air. She simply interrupted. The weave state wasn't about paralysis. It was about subtle disruption, about manipulating the flow of energy within a living being. As the guards moved to restrain her, Ren stepped forward, a determined glint in his eyes. "Stop!" he commanded, his voice ringing with unexpected authority. He reached out, and with a swift, practiced movement he severed the silver thread from Zhao's wrist. The loom's echo, sensing the disruption, retreated, vanishing back into the shadows of the academy. Yuna, visibly drained, leaned heavily on Ren, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "What was that?" she asked, her voice hoarse. Ren looked around the academy, his gaze lingering on the intricate carvings adorning the walls, the carefully arranged shelves filled with ancient scrolls, the very stones beneath their feet. "I believe," he said slowly, "we are not simply guardians of the weave. We are, perhaps, the keepers of something far older, far more dangerous." He turned to Yuna, his expression grave. "The council seeks to control the weave. But the weave, it seeks something else entirely. It seeks to unravel, to return to its chaotic origin." Chapter 15. The Unraveling. The silence of the Imperial Academy was thick with suspicion, and the lingering scent of ozone a telltale signature of the weave's exertion. Yuna, pale and trembling, sat rigidly on a meticulously crafted silk cushion, Ren meticulously examining her pulse with calloused fingers. The air hummed faintly, a subtle vibration that served as a constant reminder of the immense power she wielded, and the near-catastrophic mistake she'd almost made. The disruption, it wasn't just pain, was it? She asked, her voice a dry rasp. It felt hollow, like a river diverted, leaving a barren scar in its wake. Ren nodded grimly. Exactly. The weave isn't a weapon of immediate paralysis. It's a tool of subtle alteration. It can unravel a body's internal harmony, disrupt its flow of qi, even influence its thoughts. He paused, his gaze intense. Zhao's disorientation wasn't merely physical. He felt a sliver of doubt, a flicker of uncertainty about his own purpose. That's the true danger of the weave in the hands of someone who doesn't understand its depth. The Imperial Inspector, a man named Lu Wei, arrived with a retinue of guards, summoned by a frantic message relayed through the Imperial courier. He was a fleshy, sweating figure, his face flushed with anger and a healthy dose of fear. This charade is over, he sputtered, gesturing wildly at the academy. You, girl, are a menace. Your power threatens the stability of the Empire. Yuna remained impassive, her eyes fixed on Lu Wei. Stability built on coercion and exploitation is no stability at all, Inspector. It's a house of cards waiting to collapse. Before Lu Wei could order his guards to seize her, Ren moved with a speed that belied his scholarly appearance. He stepped between the inspector and Yuna, holding a small, intricately carved jade pendant, a gift from the Academy's architects. I believe this belongs to you, Inspector, he said, his voice calm but carrying an undeniable weight. It's a ward against disruptive energies. Perhaps you should consider wearing one. The pendant pulsed faintly, a visible countercurrent to the residual energy lingering in the room. Lu Wei, clearly unnerved, snatched the pendant and quickly fastened it around his neck. The effect was immediate. A slight tremor ran through him, and his anxious sweating lessened. You're manipulating the weave too? Lu Wei demanded, suspicion clouding his features. I am merely guiding it, Yuna replied, her voice steady. The weave seeks balance. It does not crave destruction. It simply corrects. And sometimes, Inspector, correction requires a firm hand. As Lu Wei sputtered his accusations, a new presence entered the academy. It was Master Jian, the Grand Master of the Feng clan's internal fighting style, a man revered and feared throughout the Empire. He arrived with an entourage of elite warriors, their armor gleaming in the light, their faces stern and unreadable. Feng Hua, Master Jian greeted Yuna with a curt nod, his voice a low rumble. I received your demonstration. A remarkable display, though perhaps unnecessarily dramatic. Yuna stood, meeting his gaze without flinching. Dramatic, perhaps, but effective. Your methods are antiquated, Master Jian. Relying solely on brute force is a weakness. You misunderstand, young heir, Jian said, his eyes narrowing. The weave is a potent weapon, yes, but it's also a dangerous one. Untrained hands can unravel the very fabric of existence. We have spent generations safeguarding this art, teaching others to wield its power responsibly. Responsibly? Yuna scoffed. The Feng clan has spent generations hoarding this power, using it to crush dissent and manipulate emperors. I intend to change that. Just then, the Academy's meticulously constructed walls began to tremble. Not with violence, but with a slow, agonizing shift. The intricate carvings warped, the scrolls rustled with unheard whispers, and the very stones beneath their feet seemed to vibrate with increasing intensity. Ren immediately recognized the symptom. The loom's echo is awakening, he shouted, his voice laced with urgency. It's attempting to re-establish a connection to the chaotic origin of the weave. A shimmering distortion appeared in the center of the courtyard, swirling with iridescent colors. From within the distortion emerged a figure, not a man, not a monster, but a confluence of energy, a raw, pulsing current of the weave itself. It was ancient, vast, and utterly terrifying, a glimpse into the abyss of untamed potential. Yuna instinctively reached for her sleeves, her fingers tracing the empty spaces where her obsidian needles had been. "It's breaking through the wards," she cried, her eyes blazing with determination. "Ren, the counterweave. We must reinforce the Academy's protective barrier before it's consumed." The fate of the Imperial Academy, perhaps even the Empire itself, hung precariously in the balance, dependent on the unlikely alliance of a mute herbalist and a failed scholar, and the terrifying power they both possessed.